Well, greetings and thanks for joining us today on episode number 145 of Lightbulb Moments. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also this is now a podcast. So whether you're listening to this live podcast or watching the YouTube video, we're thrilled you're with us today. I'm Tom Kuhn. I'm host and curator of Lightbulb Moments. And a lightbulb moment, what is it? Well, a moment of sudden realization, enlightenment, or inspiration. Remember, though, inspiration is great, but the whole idea behind this podcast is to move from idea into action. Remember, you can't start a fire without a spark. At Qnity, we're here to take what's confusing and overwhelming and complicated to a simpler path to prosperity. And to prosper, remember to manage your ATM, the three currencies we have in life: attention, time, and money. And thanks for spending your precious time with us today. We love hearing from you. So any ideas you have for guests, topics, etc. I do want to thank whoever was responsible for helping to nominate Lightbulb Moments as Podcast of the Year. And the congratulations to the winners of the Podcast of the Year. We're just thrilled to be nominated. Our guest today is Chris Baran, who is Global Artistic Director. He's also a facilitator and a training coach, and just a great, great guy. We're going to get to Chris here in a little bit. Our last guest, we had two. We had Tamara Fields from Accenture. She's the Austin, Texas office managing director, and she will be joining us at the Phil. She is an amazing woman. What she's accomplished is incredible. Definitely listen to the last episode to check out Tamara. We also had as a guest Jen Lyles, who is executive director of Beauty Schools Marketing Group. And she also was a great guest. So definitely check out those. I think they're separated into two episodes. Also, remember to submit a Lightbulb moment of your own on the website. And I did want to give a shout out to our sponsors, who are Lightheart Sanders, Green Circle, and Phorest. Check out recent episodes, including a recent guest, Cash Lawless, who was joined by Jordan Drake, a great episode. He's the founder of the Millionaire Hairstylist. We also had Shane Price on here very recently from Green Circle. And then a guest very recently also were Liz and Jess Arundel, all great episodes. Upcoming dates, fill you in. We have, speaking of fill you in, we have the Fill coming. Fill your bucket and fill the gaps to your businesses May 19th through 21st. Our theme this year is Leap. Take a leap and fill the gaps. And anyway, with the Fill, we're pleased to announce a couple of major collaborations to take this conference to another level through a collaboration with the University of Texas Austin McComb School of Business, which is one of the top business schools in the world, as well as the Human Dimensions Organization, which is not part of the business program at University of Texas Austin, but it really deals with the human aspect of the business. So a very powerful combination of two different segments of the university, of which we're going to be having some fantastic professors, as well as graduates of these programs that are out in the real world. So it's to be take a leap with academic and real world. So we're super excited about the conference this year. Also, on the Sunday night before the Phil, we have a celebration of Lightbulb Moments. I invite all of my past guests, including the guest we're going to have on here today, Chris. I've already given him a personal invitation. And then check out, just for fun, what we're doing is we're celebrating 13 people that are givers and go-getters who were part of a special portrait shoot last year by renowned photographer David Raculia. So far, we've released 3 of the pictures, and we'll continue to release the rest of them in the upcoming weeks. Really iconic photos that really bring together the character of each of these 13 very special individuals. Also, heads up, one day, one ticket, 1 million is coming up with Beauty Changes Lives. It is really there to help make beauty a first choice career. And this is an opportunity for your team to get involved and it's a super simple way to give back to the industry. It's March 21st, 2024, and essentially what it's doing is having your service providers each contribute the value of one ticket, and what that does is it adds up to an incredible number to make a difference. I'm going to show you the QR code. I'll put it up on the screen. If you're listening to this on the podcast, you can go to Beauty Changes Lives, their website. It should be easy to search. I'll also have someone put it in the show notes. And other dates or other things coming up to mention. Also, check out recent Money O2 podcast by Erin. Boy, she gets some amazing guests from all over. I don't know where she finds them all. And she also was nominated for Podcast of the Year. So anyway, I'm thrilled that we're able to reach the audience that we care about the most. My light bulb moment this week is really, I guess, more of a question for all of you. And I've been thinking about something, and I would love to get a little bit of feedback. And I realize their audience is going to be a combination of members of the school industry, as well as those that are in salons and spas, as well as those that are industry leaders, several that support both of those audience, whatever. But, you know, my question is this, and I would love if people would put some in the chat on this. Do we need updated benchmarks? And specifically, let me tell you what I'm talking about. You know, and benchmarks can mean a lot of different things. So let me be very, very specific. Benchmarks specifically as it relates to some of the key drivers that influence how you coach and goal set with member of your teams. For example, pre-booking. For example, new client retention, existing client retention, et cetera. My point of view, and I'm curious if anybody has any comments about this, is that they're dated. They're dated for a couple of reasons. Many of the benchmarks that we still refer to today that give us guidelines on this, what percentage of clients should be purchasing retail. I mentioned retention. I also mentioned pre-booking. But, you know, many of them go back a really long time, like 10, 12, 13 years. Then you have the pandemic in there, which turned everything upside down. So as we really look at, my feedback request is important here because we're literally looking at what the next studies that we get into. And I think as our listeners know, that when we get into a study, whether it's compensation or something like that. And so I'm wondering if I'm the only one that thinks there might be an opportunity to have some data-driven type benchmarks based upon a recent history. So we're better able to realistically assess where someone should be and where they could go. All right, I'm going to throw that one out there. And let me just see if there's any topics here. Yes, absolutely. I hear hell yes. I hear yes, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the other question I have here, for you school owners and leaders, whatever, would you find them useful in the school industry? Or is this something that would only primarily benefit salon and spa owners? Or do schools think this is relevant too? And I'm going to ask Chris this in a little bit, but Chris and I have a bunch of other subjects to get to. Anyway, so that's my light bulb moment of the week, is that we're looking at some of our future studies for the Qnity Institute. And I wonder if this is an area where there's the same amount of curiosity and the same amount of needs that exist. All right, I'm reading a mention. Yes, to update benchmarks. Need to update a pricing benchmark, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Data would be great. Yes, absolutely. I love it. I am going to read these comments a little bit more later, but right now, let's bring to the screen Chris. Chris, how are you?
Well, I am amazing, Bud, and it's absolutely a pleasure to be on here with everybody. I just wanted to give a shout out. I noticed Michael Shea and Lynelle Lynch on there. I haven't met Lynelle yet, but I've heard great things about her from her team, and Michael was a good friend of mine from times past, so I wanted to give a little shout out to them.
Two of my favorite people here. And Linnell I know very, very well, and I know Mike very well. In fact, I met Michael because he showed up on some of these podcasts, and fast forward to today, and I don't think I'm talking out of turn, Michael, if I can say we've had a beer or two together through the years, given that you're Minnesota roots. So, Chris, I am thrilled to have you. I've noticed your portrait, by the way. Your portrait is really cool. I mean, you sort of have that upward look there with hairspray, and it's just a really iconic portrait. Um, so,
You
it's
caught me at my only handsome moment in my life. So thank you.
So, the beauty of doing podcasts
Yeah.
is that you just have the ability to make some incredible people. And you were kind enough to invite me to be part of your podcast, which is fantastic. And I was honored to be your guest. And I thought, wow, this is really an awesome guy. And when I think of you, here are the first sort of adjectives that come to me, humble, because the reality is you're kind of a legend. All right. You're kind. You're absolutely a giver. Now, don't start getting red in the face here. You're obviously a collaborator, and you're a Canadian.
Knucklehead.
So you have a career that spans a very, very long time. And without getting too deep into the past, one of the things that really struck me when we were having a prep call is you were on the road for a very long time.
Yeah.
Did you say 258 days a year?
Yeah, that was at the max. That was several years that I was on the road, about 258 days a year. And I mean, it only comes down to you have to have a very good relationships with your businesses and particularly with your wife. Because, my wife is, I know many people wouldn't stand for somebody being on the road for that long. And I think actually, quite frankly, she probably look forward to me going on the road and getting me out of the house. But no, it was actually, I did the math a little bit back and I figured even though we've been married, I think it's been 54, 55 years now, that by the time I was gone away, I've actually only, if you clock the time we were together, probably only 20 years we were actually married. So I guess we have to have two celebrations.
What drove you? I mean, what drove a guy like you to really have that level of commitment that you'd be on the road that much?
Well, well, thank you. I've never had it put down as commitment before. Um, Sometimes stupidity, that might have been another word. But I think, at the very beginning, what it was. I think a lot of my career at the very beginning was very ego driven. It's about, I'm a bit of an introvert. So, I think at the very beginning, it was trying to prove to other people that I was good. And then I had to prove to me that I was good enough. And I think that evolves, Tom, it evolves into that once you figure out, at the point that I figured out, I used to get extremely nervous before I went on stage. And there was a point in my career where I would be pacing back and forth, and one of my teacher's mentors came up and said, "What the hell are you doing?" And I just said, "I'm trying to get rid of all of my energy before I step on stage because I'm a mess right now. I'm nervous. I'm upset. Or not upset. I just don't feel, my little voices are telling me like, what if I make a mistake, etc." And that person said to me two things. Said, well, before you step on stage, who are you thinking about? And I went, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, who are you thinking about right now? Like, what's going on in your brain? What's your head telling you? And he said, well, my brain is telling me I'm not worthy. I'm not, I'm not, what if I make a mistake? What if I screw up? What are they going to think about me? And then he said, so who are you thinking about? I went, oh, I'm thinking about me. He said, well, who's in your audience? And I said, well, a whole bunch of people. And he said, well, who should you be thinking about? And I said, well, probably them. He said, and then he said to me, he said, well, quite frankly, I won't say, he said, do you know I'll put it as doo-doo. It's an S word that sounds with that, but he said, do you know your stuff? And I said, well, yeah, obviously, that's why I'm here. And he said, well, then just say, I know that I know. And I said, okay, I know that I know. And he said, do you care about the people in the audience? And I said, "Mm, yeah." I said, of course. He said, well, then say I care about you. And he said, well, say it to me like you mean it. I said, well, I care about you. And he said, that's all you have to think about. Just say, before you go on stage, say, I care about you. And I know that I know. And he said, that will tell you who you should be thinking about. And you don't have to worry because you know your stuff. It'll come out in the way that you want it to come out. And that
That's
was
really,
one of the biggest things that helped me along to get me out of my own head and really to think about that it's okay if I screw up on stage. It's, to me, that just makes people more endearing. So the first part of it, to answer your question, was I think more self-serving. And once that happened to me, then I realized I didn't have to worry about me. I could just take whatever it is that I knew or that I knew that somebody else might not know and just pass that on. So that was just a guiding point in my life.
I think I've already got my first light bulb moment of the day. I think that's really a great light bulb moment that is applicable to so many of us.
Mhm.
It's interesting you describe yourself as being an introvert. And
Mhm.
introversion, extroversion has been a topic of interest of mine for a very, very long time. And introversion we actually did studies based upon stylists going through our program. And we actually found we had them sort of rank themselves in the introversion extroversion scale, and we did find, at least surprisingly to me, but maybe not to everybody, that our audience is slightly more introverted than
Mm.
extroverted.
I believe that.
And the other thing is, it's amazing how many uber successful people tend to be a little more introverted. But the final point to this, then I've got another question for you, is that most of us are really ambiverts, and ambivert lives sort of in the middle. And I'm
Yeah.
guessing that you're probably a little bit more of an ambivert because you're
Yeah.
such a social guy. So any thoughts on that?
Well, yes. And I learned a new word, an ambivert. If I said that correctly, but I had to learn how to be a bit more extroverted,
Mhm.
and I think the stage helped me with that. And then the other part is that I see I'm the kind of guy that when I go to a party at the end of an event like that, people have to come to me because I'm just going, oh, who the hell do I know? What would they say if I walked up to them? And I had to learn along the way to become a little bit more extroverted. So I can now put myself forward, but I still have those thoughts in my head. I still suffer from imposter syndrome.
Mm. Well, your current projects that you
Hmm.
work on is through a company called Fuel.
Hmm.
And tell us a little bit about Fuel, who it is, or what it is, what you do, and who you work with.
Well, it's a small company. I mean, we have a very small company. We have about five, six people that we have involved, mostly a lot of family and other parts that, not blood, but we view them as family. And it came about just from my son he was a voice actor and then started directing. And I just went, hey, I do hair, you do video. Why don't we make something? And that started I think, if I'm not mistaken, around 2006. And we started producing stuff at the time that there was at that time everybody had, and there was nobody had really cutting systems out. So we made a cutting system and we put that out, and it was very successful. And then we just what's next. So we started producing things, and then the interesting thing was, Tom, is that and I know that you and I have had conversations about this before, but um, my point in my career is, I guess maybe it was the introvert, that fact that I was an introvert. There was maybe there was people out there, mentors that could have helped me. Maybe I just didn't seek it. But I think at that time when I started off, and I'll just say, let's just start it in the 70s because that seems to make me not seem as old as I am, but there wasn't people around that would share. So there was anybody who wanted to get a leg up in the business had to, there was a lot of pain, a lot of anxiety. You had to spend a lot of money. And that really became our Fuel's mantra, is that how do we help hairdressers that are out there from a training perspective, and now even from a facilitation perspective, how do we help people to get where their future is, narrow down that future that they can get to where they want to go quicker and not have to go through the pain, the anxiety, the frustration, etc., and the money
Mhm.
that I had to go through in order to get there. So that's kind of where it started. That was sort of the crux of the whole thing.
And I think a topic for you, or something that you're pretty actively working on right now, is you really call it, I think, a Salon Association Accelerator.
Yeah, that's right.
And
That's yes. This is some with SAA for short, what we call it. Everybody has to have, you know, a little anagram for what they do. And ours is SAA, Salon Associate Accelerator. It's just how do we get people contributing faster?
it's a
Uh,
highly
mhm,
relevant topic, and I think it's the times are ripe for this. So
mhm,
you've got some nuggets around this, some different things that you see as keys to success around this, and
mhm.
why you think it matters.
Yeah, well, first of all, there's a couple of things that and first of all, hi, my name is Chris, and I'm a part of the screw ups. So, I think we learn from the things that we did wrong when we were doing it. So, to give you from my era where I came from, is you had to apprentice, you had to spend a long time just doing whatever it was. They called it training, but it was a lot of sweeping the floor and shampooing heads and so on. And that's the way that I think, and we were talking about benchmarks, is I think that there was a benchmark in our systems, in our, whether it's in our industry, where you had to spend a lot of time doing grunt work before you could get your place and I'm using air quotes for people if you're listening, the at a chair. You had to earn the chair, and that took anywhere from 6 months, a year, to even some places 3 years. And that doesn't work anymore. I think that's a benchmark that's not there. And I think that what happens is, what I noticed in the trainings that happened was that there's an effect that I call struggle, juggle, purge. People would struggle at their training. They're trying to do it themselves. They would burn out. The educator was doing it, or if it was the owner, they'd burn out. There was the time and the energy and the money that took in place. And if people did the figuring, that the math, that it takes roughly about $19,000 to train somebody over 6 months. Then they would juggle, because some of the people were up happy. The educator would say, I don't want to do it anymore, and they would leave or just stop doing it. And then they'd have to purge, meaning I'd have to, okay, get rid of everything. I'd have to start over, new people, new everything. And so it's that struggle, juggle, purge system. And I just heard a quote, and it was actually from one of my teachers, mentors, from Blair Singer. And he told me about an interview he had with John Maxwell, who talks on leadership. And he said that, and that's the difference, is most owners, we've got to start treating us, we have to treat ourselves as leaders, where John said, an owner's job, a leader's job, is not to be the smartest and not to do the most. Their job is to create more jobs. And I think that one stuck with me really, really hard, when everything that I was doing and say my before life, when I came into the realization, was that everything had to be done. It had to have Chris Baran's name on it. I had to do it, so that people who were in my salon went, oh, Chris taught me that, and Chris did this. And it was, again, that ego-driven thing, rather than treating it like a scalable business. And I think that's the real part that really brought us into where we're talking now in our associate accelerator.
So what are some things that are keys to success about accelerating the time to get
That's a
someone on
really
the
good one.
floor?
I think if I had to put it down to just a couple things, and I think that if you had to, first of all, if anybody's taking notes, I would just write down impactful training. And I think that's if you want to have truly impactful training with people, there is what I call the three S's. Systematize, you have to have systems in place, just like you would anything else. People do it for the front desk. They'll say, what's the script that I have for introducing a client, for welcoming a client? But you have to have standards. And inside that is standards. I call it really your plan, PLAN. What's the path for the individuals? What's the lessons that you're going to scale? For me, it was night before when I was doing it wrong. I was the night before I was trying to figure out what the heck am I going to do tomorrow, spending all my time doing it, and then hoping that it was there, never had any relevance to what the next scale was. And then so that was plan, lessons. A stands for assess. You have to assess your new hires, assess your people, assess your training, assess what it's like as they're moving forward. And then is network. What's the network that I have that I'm not going to do? So network just means who. The owner shouldn't be doing the teaching. Who on the team can be a good educator, and I need to train a few of them so I don't get burnout. That who can do the training. So that's, if you just want to, I'll just stop there for a second. So we can, if you got any questions on systemizing or systematizing the people. So that's the first S, systems.
Yeah, keep going. Yep.
Yeah. And then the second one is the second S is standards. And that's the thing that, I learned very quickly is that if you want to assess somebody, you can't assess anybody unless you have a standard. And what I always talk about is, what is the minimum salon standard of every discipline that you have within your training network? In other words, for a blow dry, for hair cutting, for anything that you're doing, finishing, retailing, whatever that discipline that you have in the salon, what is the minimum standard that somebody has to be able to do in order to meet the standard so that you can move forward and get them onto a chair, contributing financially as quickly as possible. So that's first one is system, second one is standards, and the third one is speed. And this is when you were talking about benchmarks this morning, and that's where I think one of the hugest areas that we have to overcome right now is that we have this thing in our systems. And I know not everybody might be going, well, that's not what I do, and that's okay. But here's what happens. Old systems versus new systems, old benchmarks versus new benchmarks. Old thinking, I've got to have somebody and I want to train them so that everything that they do meets my standard in every category, then they can earn a place on a chair. New thinking is, first of all, everybody that's out there right now, and whether you're in the schools, whether you're in a business, whatever you're at, everybody's saying right now, particularly since pandemic, everybody's saying, well, everybody thinks differently now. So if you're like me, and quite frankly, if you're just listening later, et cetera, I'm an old fart with gray hair, gray beard, et cetera. So you might think, well, he's an old baby boomer, so he's going to be thinking that way. Well, here's the thing that I've learned along the way is that new thinking, there's new kids that are out there and they don't want to put in the time. They don't want to put in that. And you might say, well, that's not good. Well, so how do we solve the time problem? Well, instead of saying you've got to put it in there for 6 months and do all this, well, they'll say, well, I can go to McDonald's and I can work $15, $17 an hour. Why the heck would I want to work for you for 6 months and not? You see, so the thinking is actually skewed, because if you keep there working there for 10 years, you're still going to be making $17 an hour. Excuse me. But if you go on what I call a learning to earning curve, then the more you learn, the more, excuse me, the more you learn, the more you earn, which means that you have to put a little bit of time and practice in. So let them get that in the salon. Put in, rather than saying you got to do this, rather than earning a place and contributing financially, new thinking is, how do I get them on the, and I don't like the word, but we're still using it. How do I get them on the floor at a chair, contributing financially, so they're bringing in something? Everybody does it to a degree. You'll say, look, I got an apprentice. I'm going to have them shampoo and I'm going to get them to take down a color, et cetera. But what if I can, in the first 2 weeks, I can train them our standard of doing how to do a retouch. And then when Tom has a client that comes in, it's a regular, and like going to a doctor, the nurse takes all of my vitals, and then the doctor comes in and talks to me. Why can't Chris, your new apprentice, who can now do a retouch and refresh as quickly as easily as you can, I get you to do it, and I can take on another client. So I can get everybody contributing and also the high ticket people can actually make more money. So those are the three S's: systematize, or systems, standards, and speed.
Yeah, I think so. What you're suggesting is, I'm going to rephrase it a little bit just to make sure I understand, is that, sort of micro milestones.
Yeah.
So someone receives a milestone of something that isn't the full enchilada of all the skills that are needed, but they're able to develop the competency and the confidence, and you have the comfort that it's
Yes.
systematized, meets your standards. So it's more of an iterative process. Did I hear you right?
Yes, that's exactly it. And because part of what we never did, and I'm going to say back in the day, I'm long in the tooth enough that I can say back in the day, but the reality is that if you learn to assess, and even when you're hiring somebody, and be real clear on what to be real clear on what I'm saying here is I don't believe in the you don't meet a benchmark, therefore you can't work here. I believe that everybody's trainable. And when I think of my career, what I started like is, I would have been fired. Quite frankly, I wouldn't have hired me back then. But it's because I didn't know that much. And so if we can assess somebody when they walk in the door to say, in what relationship do you meet with our minimum standards? Not that you can't do it, and not that you won't be able to do it, but what do I have to do to bring you up to speed as quickly as possible so you meet or exceed those standards? So you do it with the new hire when they walk on. That gives you your benchmarks of where you're at, what you have to train, what your training's at. The second part is that you do it as they're working through their program, because that way it tells you how quickly you can get them doing something. See, the old systems thinking was, I have to have everybody at top standard with every discipline. But new thinking is, if I can get somebody, and I'm just going to be really, you can start at the bottom scale. Everybody wants that somebody can do a blow dry. Well, as soon as you do a blow dry, you can go on the floor, and you can now have a place at a chair, and you can take a paying client that you can do a blow dry, because you can do it as good as everybody else in the salon can. As soon as I get you up to speed on color, you can do the color. As soon as I get you up to speed on cutting, you can do cutting, and then you add them in, and all the time that they're contributing, and they're not going to weigh at that $19,000 expense that it's taken you to train every person for a minimum of 6 months.
Hmm. The word speed, we're talking about speed, and, everything's faster. As humans, we have an insatiable need for faster, faster, faster. And, when it gets to speed, I know another element to this, and we didn't address this, but I'm just super curious, is this whole how long it actually takes to perform a service.
Mm-hmm.
30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. And, with many, my experience as a salon owner is that if you give many an option, they will take the longer time, especially if they have confidence issues.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll speak to that a little bit in terms of trends and other things that you might be doing to allow someone to reach their full potential by having the service to be the right length.
Yeah. Well, just so I'm clear here, as I heard a couple of things. Number one is, what is my opinion, and how long, or what I thought I heard was, how long is the time frame to get somebody from when they're so-so to good or great? And then the other thing that I thought I heard is, how long is that time specified for them to do a service? Was I correct
Yeah,
in my?
it was more the latter side. It was more the
Yeah,
latter. I mean, speed to have a service done. The
got it.
difference between someone taking an hour for a haircut and 30 minutes.
Yeah. Uh, well, again, I can speak from experience because, being a Sassoon trained, not, and I want to be clear, no, I did not work at Sassoons. I did not go to training. I did not do their trainings, but I was a Sassoon freak when I was a kid. And everything was about precision, as we called it at that time, and about how long you would spend. And the amount of time that you spend was generally proportionate to what was perceived as the value. And I think that's where the difference in thinking is now. And I'm going to preface this with a story that some of you may have heard. but about Pablo Picasso, who was sitting at a bus stop and somebody saw him sketching and then came up to him and said, "You're Pablo Picasso, aren't you?" And Pablo looked at him and he said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Well, I couldn't help but you notice that you were sketching something on your book." He said, "I would be just so honored if you would sketch something and pass that over to me." And which he did, and he gave it to the person. And then Pablo looked at the person and said, "That'd be $25,000, please." And the person said, "What? That only took you 5 minutes." And the Pablo said, "You're not paying for the 5 minutes that it took me to do that in. You're paying for the 25 years that it took me how to learn how to do that in 5 minutes." Old story, but the same applies to us. The more you're educated, the faster you can do things. Is if you take a look at the Beatles or any musician, they've spent their, and again, for you listening, I'm using air quotes, your 10,000 hours that is perceived to learn how to master something. But if you can do that, those people can sit down and they can write a piece of music with the lyrics. And some of them will tell you that I just did it in like 20, 25 minutes. Yet it sells millions and millions of records. Does that it only took them 5 minutes to write those lyrics? Does that mean that song is worth less or more? So to me, I think that's where we have to change our thinking. We've got to think differently.
Got it. Well, I'm looking at the clock here, and I learned something I didn't know about you when we had a little prep time for this call, and that is you're a school owner.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had no idea. It was like till the end of the call, it's like, now you own two spec schools, is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. I have two, one out of DC, and another one out of Altoona, Pennsylvania. And then it's just, and I take my hat off. I take my hat off to any school owner that is out there, simply because of the time, the energy that they have to put into that, and some of the rough spots that those teachers have to go through. And I think that's where again, part of my focus is on how do I help people get to the other side quicker, so that we move their future closer. Because here's the reality: is most people that are educators in, and I'm going to use a wide brush to paint this, not everybody, but most people that are in the hairdressing school business, in the beauty school business, they're in there and they did a really good job at what they did. And the thing that ties most of our industry up is that when people say, "I'm a great hairdresser, therefore I can go teach," when they're two completely totally different professions, totally two different wavelengths and way that you have to communicate with people. Excuse me. So I take my hat off to those people, because they're taking something they do every day, but yet they have to now go in and learn how to communicate so that they can teach effectively and to my values, what I've learned, what I had to shift my thinkings of the way that I was taught into adult learning style, where you're actually including and enrolling people in the education and engaging and tasking them and asking them questions and making them think rather than telling them answers.
Wow. I could spend a whole afternoon with you, my friend, or whole morning. And what great insights, Chris. And clearly you have a passion for this industry and have a passion for helping other people. And before I wrap up, there's some hardware over your right shoulder there. And those that are able to see this video, they can see some trophies. What do you have over your right shoulder there? Could you describe some of your
Right
accolades?
shoulder. Yeah. Yeah. There's a few awards up there that I'm very proud of. That NAHA, one was for avant-garde, one was for in the Masters. And then, interestingly, the Leo Passage Award is the one in the middle there, and extremely proud of those. And it was just a great honor, and I don't say that it's something that everybody has to do, but I think I had to do it probably for me. When I was introverted from the beginning, is I had to do it for more of a proving to myself that I could do something.
Well, I love your transparent, authentic self. Let's everybody give Chris a virtual round of applause. I'm going to share my screen just for a moment because you're going to be getting some new hardware here, if we call it that. You should be getting your $1 million light bulb to officially induct you into the Brain Trust. And please accept this as a formal invitation to join us at Lightbulb Moments at the Phil on May 19th, because we'll be honoring you and all the other guests. So once again, let's give this guy a virtual round of applause. What a
you.
great guest. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank
I
you.
loved getting to know you, and we're going to keep our conversation going, aren't we?
Yeah, we will do that. I can promise you. And I just have to say, if anybody wants to know a little bit more about that, if they just go to trainersplaybook.com and they can find stuff on there.
All right, Chris. Thanks again. All
Okay.
right, to the rest of you, whether you're with us live or podcast or the YouTube, we're grateful you joined us this week. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Check out next week. We'll be back together live at 10 a.m. Central Time on Wednesday, and it'll be a great episode coming up. And a reminder of some of our upcoming dates, including the Beauty Changes Lives, One Day, One Ticket, the Phil, Lightbulb Moments at the Phil, and a lot of good stuff coming up in the future. So thanks to all of you. I'm going to stick around for a moment and read some of the comments, and have a great rest of the week.